Here with Joe DeGuardia, and he's consented to speak with us today. So Joe, a man comes up to you and he says, this guy I never met before in my life walks up, punches me in the face, so naturally I punch him back. So do they need a promoter or a lawyer? Can you tell the people at home what's the difference between boxing and legalized assault?
Well, boxing, first off, has been here for 6,000 years. And maybe 6,000 years ago, when it took place in Ethiopia, or what is now Ethiopia, and it evolved to two men sitting on a rock punching each other, whoever could knock each other out first. Maybe you want to look back and say that was assault. However, it's two consenting people doing it as a sport. Over the years, it's evolved into a scientific sport. The Marcus of Queensberry rules have evolved into what we have today in the United States, which is probably the most highly regulated sport there is. A sport where the athletes are tested regularly, for everything, from steroids to blood diseases to head and eyes and you name it. And frankly, the sport has evolved to a state right now where this science of boxing, which truly is a science, is a sport that we can look at and say, you could have two men going out there, mano a mano, and doing what most people would, in the street would love to do and would stop and watch do. And here we are doing it in a controlled environment, in an environment where science prevails.
Why do you put women on the card?
Well, I'm not a fan of my son riding a motorcycle, but I do. But it's there, and again, they're learning their craft as well. And you see two women box, and frankly, they fight their hearts out, and they have a lot of fire in them. And I don't see why, if they're training the way they're supposed to train, and giving it the dedication they're supposed to give to the sport, I don't see why I should be the one to prevent it.
Now, your dad was involved with boxing. That was his thing. When did it become your thing?
Ever since I can remember. I have pictures of me when I was 2 years old, boxing gloves on. I remember waiting for my father to come home so I could box with him, when I was 4 or 5 years old. I remember bringing kids back to the house and from my school, and we used to box in my basement. And, everything I remember is boxing related. But certainly the Golden Gloves is a highlight. It's something you aspire to when you're young, and winning that at Madison Square Garden is something special. I think boxing will regain. I think boxing is on its way to regaining its glory days. When you look out there and see the types of fights that are being made now, when you look out there and see, the numbers that we're doing, look, you don't do 2.1 million buys if it's a sport that's dying. The reality is that boxing does have fan support, and boxing is in some respects thriving. In a lot of respects it's struggling. But I look at boxing and say that the future is going to be much brighter than it is today, or it has been in the past. I look at it and say that one of the things that we've been doing in boxing is basically restoring the credibility of the sport. We do police our sport. And with these regulations, as the general public and corporate world realizes how regulated boxing is and how we do police ourselves, it will increase the credibility of the sport. And when that occurs, corporate money will start to come in, sponsorship money will start to come in, and I think we haven't yet even tapped the surface of where boxing can go.
You're talking about restoring boxing, so that leads me to ask you about restoring the Paradise.
Boxing is synonymous with the Bronx. I think the Paradise Theater is a major symbol of the Bronx. Get involved in a boxing match, they all come together, and they could, you could have the richest guy sitting next to the poorest guy, the whitest guy sitting next to the blackest guy. And everybody comes together, and it's a real nice environment in boxing. And I liken that to the Bronx, and I liken the Paradise Theater to all of that, because you go to a show at the Paradise and, you're arm in arm with, on one hand Donald Trump, on the other hand, the neighborhood guys.
Should you give to a young Joe DeGuardia?
Be yourself.